Let's jump right into it, Bruce. You being a security expert, how important is security right now with regards to operating systems, especially with regards to open source?
Well, if you think about the promise of the internet, it's to mirror everything we do in the real world. We want to have commerce and have conversations and meetings and discussions. And security is critical to everything there. And so really the limits of security become the limits of the internet. If we can't do it securely, we're not going to do it. So security is very important.
How secure is it currently, in your opinion?
You know, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is there's lots of problems with operating system security, with network security, with computer security. The good news is that most of it works pretty much okay most of the time. So there's a lot of technical problems, but operationally, mostly we're doing pretty well.
A lot of pundits tend to say that open source is a very secure system. Would you agree with that?
You know, open source and security have an interesting relationship. What makes a system secure is a lot of smart people looking at it. And there are two basic ways to get that. One is you can hire them all and have them look at your operating system very carefully. And the other way is you could put it out there in the open and let anybody who wants to look at it. Both of those methodologies work. The open source methodology seems to work better right now, but it's not at all obvious. If a company like Microsoft wanted to, they could hire 100 security experts to analyze their code. The open source model tends to be cheaper, more distributed, and works better in that regard. There's nothing magical about open source that makes it more secure. It's the fact that a lot of smart people are looking at it. There are a lot of open source products, little niche products, that nobody's evaluated. They're not more secure.
But do you think that open source might become more vulnerable with its growing popularity?
Well, there is the notion of the popular operating systems get the vulnerabilities, right? Microsoft has been getting a lot of attacks, both because their software isn't very good and because they're the market leader. I mean, if you were an attacker, you get the most bang for your buck by attacking Microsoft. So as open source competitors like Linux get more popular, they're going to be juicier targets. But the underlying core is still there. So Linux is designed more securely. I mean, yes, there's going to be all sorts of bugs, but the methodology of finding them, of fixing them, and even of making sure they never get out in the releases is more robust. So sure, as an operating system gets more popular, it'll get more vulnerable. But I think Linux is going to do better than Microsoft, even if it's more popular.
Now let's get into the deep end. A lot of people, a lot of the general public, would, when you say to them, what is a hacker? And they've seen the movies, they think a hacker's a guy who breaks into machines. That's a notion which isn't completely accurate. How would you properly describe what a hacker is?
Yeah, unfortunately, hacker is a term that's changed definition. The original meaning of a hacker is someone who goes into systems and tries to understand them. So you can imagine someone who would hack automobile engines. Right? How do they work? How do I make them work better? You know, how can I tweak them? And that notion really started automobile engines, moved to model railroads, and then to computers. And a hacker traditionally is someone who's trying to understand how a system works. And often that means taking the system apart. Now, over the past decade or so, the term hacker has come to mean someone who breaks into systems maliciously. And unfortunately, I think we've lost that debate, that trying to reclaim the word hacker to its original meaning is not going to work, because the media, the popular belief is that hackers are the bad guys. So I think we give up at this time. I mean, hackers right now are the bad guys. And we need some other word for the good guys trying to understand how systems work.
Any suggestions?
Oh, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, we think of them as scientists, as researchers, as engineers, right? Madame Curie was a hacker. I mean, she hacked nuclear energy. How does it work? You know, Thomas Edison is a great example of a hacker. He just tried lots of things to figure out what would work best. You know, I don't know if there is a better term. And there's a good hacker and a bad hacker.
Then what is a cracker?
Well, a cracker is what the good hackers want the press to call the bad hackers. Right? During the linguistic battle for the term hacker, the good guys invented this new term cracker, which we want to be used to describe the bad hackers. It didn't catch on, nobody uses it, but that's what a cracker is.
Let's just focus our attention on viruses. Are there viruses hitting open source? And if not, why not?
Well, there are a few. I mean, there have been Linux viruses over the past few years. Very, very few. I think it's simply popularity. If you're a virus writer, your goal is to infect lots and lots of systems. And you're going to do better by picking the operating system that has the lion's share of the marketplace. Now, you certainly could write viruses for Linux. You could write them for Macintosh. But for the most part, people don't bother. And it's not some magical security aura around those operating systems. It's that they're not very popular. So if you write a virus, it's not going to spread very far. Now, that's a defense. Right? My wife uses a Macintosh, and she ignores all the security vulnerabilities I have to deal with. And she's more secure because of it. If you use Linux, you don't have to worry about a lot of vulnerabilities, and you're more secure because of it.
Could one say you're either more secure or perhaps being a bit too overconfident about what you're currently using?
You know, it's a little bit of both. I mean, again, my wife uses a Macintosh. She's not overconfident. She's rightfully smug. She has every reason to be overconfident. Right? The viruses, the worms, the attackers, they don't target her. You know, we put up a personal firewall, and you just don't see the vulnerabilities. Nothing's going after her. So sure, I mean, there is some false sense of security in that a targeted bad guy, right, someone who wants to break into a particular company would go after their operating system regardless of what it is. But for the internet epidemics, the things that attack lots and lots of people, you know, Windows is the vulnerable operating system. Security
these days is seen not only as a generic term, but one of the buzzwords all across the world since 9/11. I believe you were brought in to consult with regards to airport security in the States after 9/11. I've been doing a lot of general security.
It's interesting, but the methodology, the way of thinking, the systemic way of looking at security that we developed in the computer world applies to the non-computer world. And it's a new paradigm, it's a new way of thinking. So I've been doing a lot of work on airline security, on terrorism, on securing borders. Because there's a way of modeling security that you don't see a lot of when you look at traditional ways of viewing those problems. And I think it's surprising. I think we in the computer world have a lot to teach the non-computer security. And conversely, they have a lot to teach us. I mean, there's a lot to be learned by making those disciplines closer. Because in the end, it's all about human security. I mean, there are different technologies, there are different methodologies, there are different techniques, but you're really securing against people and people wanting to do bad things. So the things we learn in the computer world affect airlines. The things they've learned in the airline industry over the past decades affect computers. So we can really teach each other a lot.
What has one learned through increased security required on all levels, from ground up all the way through to computers?
Well, I think we've learned that most security measures don't work. And a lot of security is simply selling to the public the idea of false security. I mean, airline security is a great example. Pretty much everything that's been done since 9/11 is a complete waste of time, with two exceptions: reinforcing the cockpit door and teaching passengers to fight back. I mean, everything else is a red herring. ID checks, the background checks, a lot of the baggage screening. I think that's all mostly a waste of money. And I say that because I look at security as a system. I look at the weakest link. I mean, if you spend billions of dollars defending your airplanes and the terrorists move to shopping malls, you've wasted your money. You haven't actually solved the problem. And so there's an example of something we've learned, and we know this in the computer world. We know security is as strong as the weakest link. In the computer world, we get that. We know it makes no sense to increase the key length of the cryptography if the operating system is bad. Now, we know the bad guys are going to go in through the vulnerabilities, and that fixing something else isn't going to make it better. So I think we've learned that most security really is a waste of money. We've also learned that security is measured not by how well it works, but how well it fails. that all security fails, and it has to fail well.